Alright, so I just recently got this thing running. I threw a wire harness in it finally. That fixed a lot of the wiring issues. Problem is now, I didn't check the transmission before I put it in, so the fluid looks real sparkly. Full GSR swap and GSR transmission. I have a B16 transmission laying around, so that's what we're going to be doing today, is pulling this motor, getting the trans separated off of it, and throwing the B16 transmission on. So hopefully either I can build the GSR, or I don't know what I'm doing with it yet, but I'm glad I can keep the car at least movable for now. That B16 transmission has been sitting around for like 6 years, I was told. So I went through, cracked the case on it, cleaned it up, re-siliconed it, and sealed it, and yeah, we'll see how she does. Little update video. Here is the CRX finally. I did get it running and driving thanks to that wire harness. Plugged it in like 15 minutes. This car's had tons of wiring issues with trying to do an MPFI swap or the DPFI swap. Or sorry, no, the OBD1 swap. So went ahead and bought a wire harness, plugged it in 15 minutes, and she fired right up and has no issues. No engine light, no nothing. Anywho, I'm running a B series alternator, and it gets really close to that frame. It actually hits it if the motor sits just right. So I did a bunch of bashing on the motor. Or, not bashing on the motor. I did a bunch of bashing on that little frame rail right there. And hopefully it's pushed over enough to keep running this B series alternator. Either that, or I have to go to a D series or find a smaller belt, which requires more money, which I don't want to throw at this thing. Still gotta make sure all the motor mounts are tight. I think it was shifting a little weird. Transmission is kind of messed up on this thing. I'll put a picture up. It's getting ready to storm, so that's probably what you hear. There's all the raindrops all around. And then this truck is still in dire need of a front end, but that video I'll be working on soon. I think the best way about going about this motor pull is going to be to get the intake off first. I didn't hook up the alternator because I just had to move it inside, so alternator would be next. Probably drain the coolant, exhaust, and then we can move on to underneath the car, which is just shift linkage and the axles, and then it's just motor mounts to pull up and out, and then wiring, of course, but we can do that while we're doing the top end stuff, get it all unplugged and out of there. Alright, so we're getting this intake off. There's just a 10mm bolt right here for the clutch cable, so it does not run a hydraulic clutch. I'm going to go ahead and throw that back, actually. So it's in there. And then intake air temp sensor. This pane, that shoe just pops right down. Then all your ejector plugs. Just like that. Super easy to get off of there. This will spray fuel once you disconnect it, so I like to do that last. Nothing's hot enough to catch fire or nothing like that, so I'm not going to worry too much about catching it. Spin this guy off, throttle full open, undo that. Cable is out. Wiring, you got your map sensor, your TPS, idle air control valve, and you can pull from underneath the intake on this wire harness. I know the stock one goes over, so whatever you have on here. I know a lot of guys like to just modify their old harnesses. This car did really not like the old harness being modified. Something was really wrong with that thing. So unfortunately I had to just spend the money and get it done. Vacuum line for your brake booster. I just put that out of the way over there. Just kind of tuck the wires underneath for now, and we can get to those later and get those out of the way. This guy should just be able to get with your hand. Just a little spring clamp for mine. And once we pull this off, just kind of work it, and she will spill fuel, so be careful of that. I like to grab the wiper arm and put it up by the windshield. And then we do have to crack this fuel line and get this off. Make sure you throw this back on the fuel rail because there will still be a lot of fuel in this fuel rail. Let's see. And then it's just the 13 millimeter bolts or nuts holding it on. You have a coolant port right down here, and then the coolant port on the back side of the idle air control valve. That way. That port, not this port. Alright, now that the intake's off, this guy is the one that goes to the idle air control valve. And then I've left one on the intake that goes to the PCV. These guys can all be unplugged. You got your oil pressure sensor down here, alternator. This one's knock sensor because this is runs a P72 ECU, not a P28. And then just a 10 millimeter bolt on the alternator here. She should come right off. And then I didn't have this alternator off, but right down here, there is a 12 millimeter on top. And then underneath of it, just under the pulley there, that is a 14 mil. Those two get loosened, and then there's little like bolts that you can push backwards towards the rest of the motor, and then the alternator should come out. Alright, once you have those guys slid out, this guy should be able to just kind of rock back and pull right out of there. And another side note, if you are running a B series alternator on a CRX, you either have to bash in the frame rail right here, or you can do a D series alternator with a smaller belt because the pulley's smaller and it doesn't hit. Yeah, I found out the hard way about that. As you can see, it was hitting really good. So I'm gonna probably paint that up pink at some point again. Alright, next gonna go ahead and get the exhaust manifold off. Just a bunch of 14 millimeter bolts. Okay, got that off. I got it dropped down kind of by the dipstick tube on the other side of it. Next is to get the battery and the battery tray out. And then we'll go ahead and disconnect everything else, like connector-wise. Alright, got the battery tray out. The reason that has to come out is because that is really tight with the frame rails on this. We'll also have to take the crank pulley off on this side, otherwise this motor does not go down in here. And that's why we're pulling the motor out and not just dropping the transmission, because you don't have any room in there for the transmission to actually go back. It gets stuck on this lip, and I don't feel like cutting up the car or doing anything like that. So, the connectors, this is your reverse lights. You got VTEC solenoid, engine coolant temp, and then, right? No, this is engine coolant temp. And then the other one was the fan. It's supposed to be plugged over here, but it was overheating like that for some reason, so I'm just gonna run it over here. And then that guy. I am running a jumper wire for my distributor, so because it's a OBD2 distributor and not OBD1, so I have a jumper for that. Where is it? Oh, it's on the side. Just pull it. And then over here, I think we got everything over here. I'm gonna leave the oxygen sensor plugged in because it's not doing anything all the way down there. And it's got a lot of slack in it. This stuff we can just kind of gather up. Oop, almost forgot about the little starter wire. You can just gather that up, and then the engine harness has a ground right on the thermostat housing. So as soon as we move that, we can shove all this wire up here and call it good. Alright, getting on to the clutch cable here. This is I believe it's a Hasport kit that converts a hydro clutch to a cable clutch. And all you do is just loosen up this guy to where you can should be able to just pull it off, I think. Should be able to get this guy high enough to then come down here, reach down here, pull this guy out of place. There we go. I mean, it is kind of a pain to get it in there, but it's alright. Just gotta work at it. There we go. Got pulled up. There she is. Then it can slide right out of the bracket like that. And then this guy, I'm just gonna droop over this way. Just hang it. And there's your clutch cable off. I'm not gonna remove the starter until we get the transmission out. And I believe it's just the ground cable right there. There was one right there on the transmission, so I took that off. Remove the ground cable right there. Remove the positive terminal wire. And then it's all just under the car stuff, so just pop the axles out and shift linkage, and then it's just motor mounts and she's ready to pull. Alright, and then to pull this axle out of I'm on the driver's side right now. I'm just going to go ahead and loosen the ball joint and probably take the tie rod off, so then I can lean this forward and then take the axle nut out. And because it doesn't have to come all the way out, it just has to come out of the transmission enough to pull the motor up. Alright, so I did have to take off the lower strut bolt to the control arm, and then you just kind of, I stood on this and pulled it out, and I'm now realizing that my other transmission does not have axle seals, so that'll be cool. It's not pulling too much on the brake line, so it should be okay. And also got this side popped out. I'm just gonna leave him in there like that. Seems good. And then shift linkage, and we should be able to pull it up and out because shift linkage is down there, and I think it's just all three mounts, and then we're good to pull. Okay, and finally, to get the shift linkage off, you just want to grab this thing. There's a little clip essentially. Try to put your hand over it so it doesn't shoot off. Oh, it doesn't want to come off. Oh, there it is. Huh. Usually, you have to take a hammer and a punch and punch that out. But I guess not today, because now that slides off. You just lay it there. Then on the other side of this guy, You have a 12mm bolt. This will come off with a washer that's right here, and then you just slide that off. Alright, so I've got the engine and transmission apart and out of the car. The flywheel bolts are backing out. That's a different problem for a different day. The clutch plate from a hydro GSR transmission and a cable B16 are different. I believe that the flywheel's the same. Like, you can use that flywheel, and I think you can use this pressure plate. So I'm going to see if anybody I know has a B16 clutch plate laying around. And in the meantime, I'm going to get those loose and red Loctite those. Because as you can see, oh, which one was it? Wasn't it? Yeah, I marked them. And they are not around any of their marks. Like that guy. That's backing out. That's not good. This guy's backing out. I can't see this one, but you get the idea. So, that'll be fun.